Hey guys, welcome back. In the last video, we built new fuel lines from the tank all the way up to the engine bay. In this episode, I'm going to show you guys how to flare the end of the line to hook up to a GM fuel filter. And I'm also going to redo that fuel tank vent hose that I built out of nylon. I think it'll look a lot better if I build it out of the NiCopp line. Here is the fitting we need to make. It has a little ridge right here, and then an O-ring, and there's a slight flare at the end, but that's mostly just to keep the O-ring in place. Let me peel that O-ring off. Let me peel that O-ring. See if you guys can see that. So I bought this because I need the 16mm nut. No one in town had just the line nut. This hose was a couple bucks. It's a repair hose for a GM. So I need to see if I can duplicate that flare onto this hose, and I'm going to use my my flaring tool from Mastercool. So this is a universal hydraulic flaring tool set. The Mastercool part number is 71475. This will do brake lines, quick disconnects, metric, standard. But what I use it for most, because here in Colorado brake lines don't rust out that often, is I use it for projects like this where I have to build a quick disconnect. I've also built a lot of bypasses for the Fords that have that switching valve on the frame rail. Whenever we switch to a single tank and put a high pressure pump in the tank, I bypass that valve and I build all the lines out of steel. But after seeing how easy this stuff works, I may use this instead if it flares good. So I have two options for GM line forming, 3/8 and a 5/16. This is a 3/8 line, and there's really nothing special inside of there. It's just kind of a flat stop that'll slide over the line, and then once I put it in this jig, it will create a little bubble down the line a little ways. And then if I chose to, I could take this back out, put the tapered cone in, and get that little flare so the line doesn't fall off, or the O-ring doesn't fall off the line. Now this is a little cumbersome to do. I suppose you could mount this in a vise, but it seems like you never have enough hands to get this done yourself. We'll see if we can manage just threading this out all the way. It is hydraulic, but there are threads to take up the slack. So you gotta back this out before you start. Loosen that screw, and then I'm going to take the 3/8 dies. They just have a recess there for that other cup to fit into. And I'm going to loosely set these in here. Get this line started in there, and what I'm aiming for is to have the line flush with the end of the dies. And then you just crank down on it, and it bites in a little bit to the line. It will leave some marks, so if you're going for a super clean look, you may have to polish it afterwards. But the line is flush with the end of that square right here, or this rectangle. And then now we need to insert this other piece of the die. We're going to screw this in by hand. And then once the slack is taken out, there's a little knob on here. We're just going to tighten that down. And we're just going to start pumping this. I didn't apply any oil to this. I want to see how it reacts without oil. Sometimes when I do this, it makes it a little easier if I lube up the line, because this die can get stuck on there. So as I'm pumping this, I'm making sure the line isn't sliding out the top, and it is not. I'm just going to go ahead and keep cranking on it. I felt like it bottomed out there. Loosen the hydraulic valve, and we're going to untwist this and see how we did. I guess I'll go ahead and test out the cone for flaring as well. And we just want a very faint flare just to hold the O-ring. Now we can loosen up the clamp that holds the die in there. Zoom this in. And that's it. It seemed like it worked pretty well. There is the store-bought one versus the one I did. I probably over-flared the end just a bit, but it all depends on if that would have fit into the filter. It's only slightly larger than that, but I'll just have to make sure when I do it for real on the vehicle that I don't over-flare that end. So that's what I'm going to do next. I wanted to show you out here, for one, I wanted to test how it bends on this pipe, and it's going to be difficult for you to see what I'm doing while I'm doing it in the vehicle. First thing I'm going to do is put the line nut onto the line, and I'm just going to run it up a ways and then put a zip tie so it stays out of my way for this whole process. And then I need to try not to unbend my work up there. I got to cut the line here, and then we can put a flare on it. And then I'm just going to give it a very small flare, see if I don't screw it up. That turned out much better. Just a very small flare. As long as it goes into the fuel filter, we are golden. Sweet, the line went right in. I got a few tweaks I want to do because I want to put a coated clamp right here. So I'm just going to have to put a little bend in the line. I want to show you guys one more cool thing you can do with this tool. I have this line kind of pre-built for my vent hose, but it's only going to be quick disconnect on one end. The other end, I need to have a short section of rubber. So I could just slide the line on there, the rubber, and crimp it, but I do want a flare to keep it in place. So I'm going to use the same GM line forming tool, but instead of pumping it all the way down, I'm just going to give it a quick squeeze. It's going to put a little bit of a bubble on the end of this hose. And then when I put the hose on there and the hose clamp, it won't slide off. So I'm just taking up the slack, and then I'm just going to give it one pump and see where we're at. I think I can give it a little more. If you can see that right there, I just put a little bump on the end. I could probably go just one more pump and get it a little bit bigger. But that bump right there, if I put a hose clamp on the rubber hose right here, it's not going to slide over that bump. Now if it was a pressure line, I would want a little more of a hump there, but it's not. It's just a vapor line. It won't be an issue. So here's the final product. I got the two fuel lines that are quick disconnect to the filter. I built this other line, it has a 90 on the end with a GM push to connect fitting up there. Comes over here, does a little zigzag behind the shock, and then there's a short rubber piece connecting that up to that vent valve. So that turned out good. I like the way that looks. This line right here, we have the flare built that allows it to hook right to the fuel filter. I got everything tied up on this line in the last video. Comes along to the front. I did put this e-brake mechanism back together just to make sure I had clearance, and we're all good there. And it still goes up to the engine bay to nothing because I'm waiting on the intake and fuel rail before I build the rest of that system. So since we're waiting on the intake before I can do the rest of the fuel system up under the hood, we still need to wire it. I haven't decided if I want to run the wires underneath the vehicle or through the passenger compartment. I really only need to run the one wire, the fuel pump power supply wire, and there is a couple of empty grommets right above the tank where I could punch a hole through and drop that wire down. So I may have to take part of the interior out just to run that wire. There are currently no other wires run underneath the vehicle along the frame rail, so I can't de-loom anything and reattach it. But I could build my own loom, and if I do that, then I'll probably run a couple of extra wires just for future expansion. That'll be in a later video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.